Hey everybody. One question that I get from other shooters who are aspiring to shoot better is how do I read the wind more accurately? Well, I had an idea because I spend like 90+% of my practice time at 100 yards. So I hardly ever practice at full distance, but when I do shoot at full distance, I am able to effectively adjust for the wind. And so the question is, well, how is that possible? So let's talk through this, through some examples. So let's make some simplifying assumptions here, okay? We're going to assume that the wind is constant. It's not switching on us, it's not changing on us, and we're only going to take 2 shots, okay? So what we're really focusing in on here is our ability to adjust from the result of the first shot to make the second shot as good as possible. Okay, so let's say that our ability to hold the reticle still and call our shot, let's say it's represented by this grid. So we're able to call when a shot is like definitely a 10. We're not able to call that it's an X or not, but we're able to call that it's a 10 or if it's not. Okay, so like, you know, a 10 on the line or maybe a 9 or an 8. So what does that mean? That means that when we break the shot, wherever the gun is pointed when we broke the shot, which is represented by this red circle, it could have been here and it could have been here. We're just not certain. Okay. So let's just assume that we call a 10 and it just happens to have broken dead center. And let's say the shot comes up and it comes up there. X at 3 o'clock. Rejoice, right? Are we going to click? No, not really. You know, given that our shot calling resolution is whether it's a 10 or not, and it comes up an X, probably not going to touch anything. So what happens in the second shot? Well, remember, the wind isn't changing, and we only have 2 shots. So let's say that on the second shot, we also call a 10. Anywhere in this center grid. And let's just say that the trigger actually breaks right here. So we called a 10, we broke it here, and the shot pops up here. The wind hasn't changed. The relationship between where the trigger broke and where the shot landed is the exact same as it was before, but we get a very different result. We call it a 10 and it ends up a 9. And we're confused because we made a great shot. We shot an X on the first shot, and now all of a sudden we've got a 9 on our hands. And even worse, we think the wind changed on us. After all, we centered that shot up for the first shot, and bam, we hit an X. And then the wind blew us out there into the 9 ring. Now, Let's take a look at that in a different case. Let's say our ability to hold the gun still and call the shot is much finer. Let's say it's, we know when it's an X or not. So we break a shot, and if we call that it's an X, a center X, right, then we know it's in here. Anywhere in here. It could be anywhere, but it's in here. So let's say we call a center X, and just like in the first example, let's say it is. And just like in the first example, let's say the shot pops up and scores as an X at 3, right on the line. Well, in this instance, we know that we need to click the knobs because our shot calling resolution is fine enough that we would say this shot is off call. So we click. Maybe it's if we're feeling conservative, right? Like, hey, you know what? I thought I broke at center, but I know it could have been here, right? So that'd be worth 1 click. Or I thought I broke at center, but it could have been out here. That could be 1, 2, 3 clicks, maybe. Or, I just don't know. So I'm just going to give it, let's just say we give it 1 click. And so let's say we take our second shot, and suppose that the trigger breaks when the gun is pointed at the 10 ring, maybe mid 10 ring, at about 2 o'clock, just like in the first example. But unlike the first example, the resulting score is a 10. And the only difference in these two examples is our ability to call our shot is finer. That resolution is finer. And not only is the result better, the numerical result, but more importantly, our understanding of what actually happened is way better. It's way closer to the truth. The wind did not change. All right. So that's one example of, it's a simplified example where the wind doesn't change and we are only taking 2 shots. And we saw it through the eyes of a shooter who has a 10 ring-ish hold and ability to call shots, and another shooter whose whose resolution for shot calling is finer. Now let's look at a different scenario, okay? Same simplifying assumptions that we had before. Wind does not change and we're only taking 2 shots. Okay. So we're going to look at this first through the eyes of the shooter who's got a shot calling resolution that's coarser. It looks like this, represented by this grid. And let's say, we fire and we call it a 10. And let's just, that means that the shot could have broken anywhere in here. But let's just suppose that it broke there. And let's say the shot comes up here. Now, we called a 10. It comes up an X. And we're thinking to ourselves, that's on call. Because our shot calling resolution, which is related to our wobble and how fine we're able to capture that flash sight picture, everything that goes into that. Our shot calling resolution is relatively coarse. It's just where we are in our development. And then let's say the next shot, we also call a 10. And instead, the trigger breaks, let's say over here. An X at 4 o'clock. But we don't know that. We just know that we broke a 10. The trigger breaks when the gun is pointed at a 4 o'clock X, and the resulting score is an 8. So again, we're going to think, man, that wind changed on me again. Now let's see what happens with the shooter that has a finer ability to call shots. So, you fire, and just like in just like for the first shooter, let's say the trigger breaks here, we're going to call that a 10 at 9. We're going to call that it was not centered up, that we were off to the left. And then the shot pops up and it's scored as an X at 3, just like for the first shooter, but we know that we're off call here. The first shooter did not know they were off call. This shooter knows. This shooter knows not only are they off call, they're way off call. The actual shot isn't just, in the next square over. It's 2 squares over. So, this shooter is going to make a pretty big adjustment. Maybe one, not just one click. One click isn't going to cut it. This is pretty clear. If our resolution is such that we know we shot an X at 9 and it pops up as an X at 3, we know we got to click over. So I don't know. Let's just say we're conservative, let's say, and we give it 3 clicks. And just like with the first shooter, let's say, the second shot that we put up there is an X at 4. Same scenario, but completely different result. We end up with a 10. And it's on call. And what's even more important, we know that the wind did not change on us. The truth of the matter is that our original wind call was off, and we needed to adjust it, and we did by 3 clicks. Okay. So what is my point? My point is work on your fundamentals. Shrink your wobble. Improve your ability to call your shot. And make your shot calling resolution finer so that you can see. You can better see and understand what the wind is or isn't doing. It's about fundamentals, y'all. It's about having a steady hold, and that is something that will continue to develop as you grow in your marksmanship journey. It also means being able to refine that flash sight picture. Where exactly was the gun pointing when the shot broke? Sometimes that could mean getting a new glasses prescription. That's what I did, and it helped. Maybe if you look through somebody else's scope, you borrow their scope for a little while, maybe you find out that it looks better. Your ability to call your shot improves. Maybe a scope that has better glass. The last thing I'll mention is trigger management. Your trigger brake. Whether you move that trigger without disturbing the sights is critical. Every one of us, from those of you who are just starting to those of us who have been doing this for a long, long time, we're all working on the exact same things right here. Fundamentals, fundamentals. That's one of the beautiful things about this shooting sport, is that it's 100% about fundamentals. It's the same for everybody, and there are really no secrets. There are no secrets in high power, folks. It's about putting your mind to it and putting in the work. All right, that's it for today. Happy training, everyone. Hope this helped.